So I've teased the provisions a little bit. Let's turn now to look at the provisions that go along with some of these money items for agriculture. And the first page should have your first item. It is the Large Animal Health Enhancement Fund, section 10.1. And again, this follows the money, the $130,000 for grants for, I'll get into it as we go along. So if you turn to page 237, line 9, this is where the advisory committee is established. This is a committee of 8 people that will be housed under the Agricultural Finance Authority that will make the decisions regarding criteria and the grants for this program. Line 45 establishes the fund, the special fund that we saw in the committee report for this program. The top of page 238, line 5, says that the Ag Finance Authority may use up to 5% of those funds for administrative expenses. Subsection C details the grant eligibility and says that there shall be grants of no more than $25,000 per year to recipients and that they must serve counties of fewer than 100,000 people. And then it also gives authority to the advisory committee to establish other criteria as needed. Subsection D says that the funds may be used for various purposes, including repayment of student loans, equipment needed for their services that they provide, and any other additional use as defined by the advisory committee, excuse me. Subsection E has limitations, including the need to review recipients each year to see how they use the funds. And subsection F has a report that the advisory committee must submit by October 1st to the Agricultural Oversight Committee and Fiscal Research. The next provision in agriculture starts on top of page 239. This is the North Carolina Agricultural Manufacturing and Processing Initiative, or NCAMP. This also follows the money. You saw $25 million non-recurring in both years of the biennium for this program. So the purpose of this grant program is to increase the number of value-added processing of agricultural commodity facilities across the state. And subsection B establishes this fund, NCAMP, and details how the money can be used. So line 22 says $200,000 of these funds may be used by the Department of Agriculture to identify and assess opportunities across the state for more facilities. Line 28, $250,000 of these funds may be used to market and recruit more facilities. And line 33, the remaining funds may be used for grants. And there are details about those grants following. Subsection C says that DACs may develop the guidelines for this program. And turning to the top of page 240, line 8 is where there is the limit on the grants. There can be no more than $5 million per facility over the lifetime of the grants they receive from this program. Subsection D is a report by October 1st to Oversight and Fiscal Research, and it must detail the criteria listed from lines 18 to 24, the number of grants awarded, the list of the recipients and how much they received, where these are, and how much money is remaining at the end of each year as well. And subsection E, again, is that appropriation, $25 million non-recurring in both years of the biennium. And while I'm up here, we've finished agriculture, I'm going to go ahead and cover wildlife, the other section that I cover. So back to your money, if there are no questions about agriculture. We can pause if you'd like. Okay.
Representative Dahl.
The committee that you spoke of on line 9, page 237, is that a new committee? And who chooses that committee? I'm just curious. I'm not. Where do the members come from?
Cameron?
Yes, ma'am, that is a new committee, and it details numbers 1 through 6, where those people are
there
coming
we
from.
go.
So the Commissioner of Agriculture, someone that person designates. Okay.
I got you. We were going so fast.
Representative Jeffrey.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On the Large Animal Healthcare Enhancement Act, they have to serve an area of population less than 100,000. Does the practice have to be located in that county that is 100,000 or less, or they just have to serve? And if they only have to serve, is there a certain amount of clients they have to maintain?
Ms. Tammer?
Per the language, it does say serve, but I believe that would be a criterion that the advisory committee could then discuss in more detail as far as how they determine who is being served and where they lived. They would get into the details of that.
Thank you.
Follow it.
No, thank you.
Representative Brody.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On page 238, D again, the grant funds, it appears that they are intended to help a county deal with their situations, but yet line 25 is the repayment of educational loans. It just doesn't seem to fit. Could you kind of explain the rationale behind that? Because here we're providing services, then all of a sudden, well, we can use that to pay somebody's loan off. Can you explain the rationale behind that?
So yes, sir. The recipients are actually the veterinarians themselves, and they have to serve in the county. So the counties aren't receiving the funds, it's going to the veterinarians, and perhaps they would have student loans that they would need to repay, and this would help with that.
Representative Gillespie, would you like to make a clarifying statement for Representative Brody?
Could you repeat your question, Representative Brady, please?
Yeah, under D, line 20, this is page 238, line that the grant use of grant funds, line 23. You look at line 25, it doesn't, unless obviously you're going to explain something that I don't know about, but line 25 and 26 don't seem to fit the intent of the use of the grant funds. And I'm just wondering if there's a particular reason why we're adding that one in there.
Appreciate that question. Just a little bit of history on this. When we started having discussions about the possibility of a program that could meet some needs, early in those conversations, there were some concerns about the type of funds that would be available and what those funds would be used for. And what we were trying to do is capture as broad a base or as many of those needs across the state as we could. And that's why that's worded the way that it is, because we had so many different situations from the various groups that provided input into it.
Follow it.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I guess, may I present this, that would it be safe to say then that if you're recruiting a veterinarian to a county that may desperately need them, but probably has difficulty affording all that, this would be an incentive to come out to that county and work in the rural counties?
Absolutely, that's the purpose of it.
Okay. Thank you.
Representative McNeely.
Just to give a little context, right now, from the last time I heard about a year and a half ago, I think for every 15 veterinarian students that graduate, only one is going to large animal. The rest are small. And so there's basically, we can't find somebody to work on horses, cattle, large animal. They can make so much more money working on cats and dogs and other animals in that way. So we're doing anything we can to attract somebody to come and work in the large animal vet practice. And hopefully these animals usually tend to be in very small rural counties, not in your Mecklenburgs and your Wakes. And so this is a good program. I think this will be a good step forward in trying to get these people to want to go into that part of the veterinarian field.
Other questions or comments? Thank you. Ms. Tammer.
Moving now to wildlife. I was moving very fast. We're in the committee report, wildlife. We're going to start on one of the fund code tables that Christine showed you on page D95. So on page D95, you'll see that lovely table that Christine showed you. There's the 3 columns for the base budget. And if you look down across here under net appropriation in the base budget, there are 6 lines that end in a net negative general fund appropriation. You can see 1102, Fund Code 1102, if you go all the way across, it's a negative $1. Not a big deal, but if you keep going down to, say, line Fund Code 1161, that's negative $875,477. And that's just not ideal budgeting. So you will see, if you keep going across that line, that there were some changes made to have that net appropriation cancel out to zero at the end. So the items I'm going to show you are all in an effort to reach that, and there's a special provision as well directing wildlife to work with OSBM to make sure that no fund code has a net negative on the bottom line. So we can turn the page, a couple pages, to page D101. Again, skipping all of the salaries and benefits, we're looking down at department-wide custom grouping, and I'm going to jump to item 183. So item 183 is that correction I just showed you in the fund code tables. All of those receipts amount to just over $2.2 million, and what this does is it puts all of those funds in one pot and directs wildlife to redistribute them as needed across the fund codes, again, ensuring that there is a positive or a zero in every fund code line. Item 182, I skipped. Let's go back to that. That is just over $8.7 million. There was another issue with their base budget, and this was coming in from their special fund. So wildlife is very heavily supported by receipts, the sales for licenses, fishing and hunting, and vessel receipts. And those receipts are all collected in a special fund and then transferred into the general fund to support operations. Well, in the last year, wildlife wanted to spend funds on really exciting fun things and increased what they projected they would actually receive in receipts by this amount, $8.8 million. They also increased their requirements, or the amount they could spend by that, without any proof that those funds would actually be collected. So what we're doing to help is to bring them back down to what is actually their 5-year average, what they've actually collected over the last 5 years, and made the amount match that. And we also, in a special provision, direct them to work with OSBM to try and settle things out so y'all can have a better understanding of what their budget needs actually are going forward. Their budget was just a little all over the place and not in line with their actual needs, so you'll be able to see that better. Turning the page to page D102, you'll see items 185, 186, 187, 188. Those are all those individual fund codes that need to be corrected on that table that you saw. The next page, page D103, item 189 is the first expansion item. This is $3.5 million non-recurring for what is right now titled the Outdoor Heritage Advisory Council. This is the program that offers grants to schools to get students outside. It's called the Go Outside Grants. There is a provision that will change the name of this to the Youth Outdoor Engagement Commission, which is why it's identified as the Youth Outdoor Engagement Commission here. Items 190, 191, again, are those base budget corrections. Item 192 is a disaster receipt from the SERDIF, the State Emergency Response and Disaster Relief Fund, of $10 million non-recurring for Lake Mattamuskeet for an outfall canal project. And turning to page D105, you'll see the correction in Wildlife Special Fund. Item 193 is that $8.7 million correction in the special fund where those receipts were over-anticipated and incorrect. And then item 194 is the receipt for the Youth Outdoor Engagement Commission. And the last two items in wildlife are again in the special provisions, and I've touched on them both. This begins on page 262 in your special provision packet. So on page 262, there's a provision titled Commission-Based Budget Correction, and this is where wildlife is directed to work with OSBM to make sure that no fund code ends in a negative net general fund appropriation. And the last provision in wildlife is on the top of page 263. This is Rename Outdoor Heritage Advisory Council. Again, this is renaming that council to the North Carolina Youth Outdoor Engagement Commission, and it changes their statute throughout. It also adds on lines 23 and 24 the use of grants as a means to fulfill their mission. They are already doing this with those 3 GO grants that they provide. This just adds that in statute. And with that, I'll take any questions on wildlife.
Any questions for wildlife? Representative McNeely.
Just one question. Since you took the 5-year average to try to really figure out maybe what they were going to get in, did you see dips because of the COVID issue? And did you maybe do a little thumb ruling in there to give it a little more help, or what? How did that play?
We didn't make any considerations relative to the COVID issue.
Okay, didn't know if it changed or not.
A little bit on it.
Ms. Tammer?
There was an increase after 2021 because of COVID, but they have not decreased that greatly, maybe $2 million or so since COVID. There are still more people in the state purchasing licenses than there were before.
All right. We will now be able to go through the next session with Jenny Ford. Jenny, thank you.
Good morning. So I will be starting with the commerce money items on page D22. We're starting with item 34. This is an internal auditor, 100,000 recurring and 1 FTE to support internal audit functions at the department. Item 35 is about $200,000 recurring and 1 FTE for an outdoor recreation recruiting position at the department. You'll see a related reduction to the EDP&C budget in the later budget code, which we will get to. There's currently an outdoor recreation recruiting position at EDP&C, and we're transferring the funds from EDP&C to Commerce and moving the position, or setting up a position in Commerce for that function. On the next page, item 36, is eliminating a transfer to the Department of Transportation for an Economic Development Project Liaison. Item 37 is $150,000 recurring for the NC Innovation Council. This council was established in Session Law 2021-106 for the regulatory sandbox for financial technology. Please don't ask me any questions about what that means. Item 38 is $5 million non-recurring and economic relief for the town of Canton. The next item is further down the page, item 40. This is 1 FTE for analytics support staff in LEAD, the Labor and Economic Analysis Division at Commerce. Item 41 is $40,000 non-recurring for an economic impact study of the impact of the All-Star Race, which will be held at the North Wilkesboro Speedway in May. There is a related special provision for this item. And that is it for what is in the main Commerce Budget Code. I'll be moving now to 14601 for state. Aid. 45, provide additional recurring and non-recurring funds for the High Point Furniture Market Authority. Item 46 provides additional recurring and non-recurring funds for the North Carolina Biotechnology Center. Item 47 provides additional recurring and non-recurring funds for the National Institute of Minority Economic Development. Item 48 provides non-recurring funds to Golden Leaf for vocational training workforce grants, and there is a related special provision for these grants. Item 49 creates a new Shell Buildings pilot program, also to be administered by Golden Leaf, with $10 million non-recurring. If you read the snappy there, those funds are transferred from cash balances for other existing economic development programs. Item 50 provides non-recurring funds for the Crossroads of America Economic Development Alliance. And item 51 provides funding in the second year only for NC Innovation, which is a nonprofit group, and there is a related special provision. The next set of items begins on page D37. Item 52 provides $1 million recurring to EDP&C to administer the Mega Sites Readiness Program. This program was created in Session Law 2022-74. Items 53 and 54 are related. Item 53 provides additional funding for the Mega Sites Readiness Program. Item 54 provides funding for a related program, the Select Sites Readiness Program, where a mega site is a contiguous parcel of at least 1,000 acres of land suitable for industrial development. A select site is basically the same thing, but less than 1,000 acres. Item 54 is that cut I mentioned earlier, where there's reduction to the funds to EDP&C, and those funds are then used in the 14,600 budget code for that outdoor recreation recruiting position within the department. As in the case of Ag and Wildlife, there are some base budget corrections in here. Items 56 and on the next page, 57, are straightening out the 1NC and 1NC small business program budgets. Item 58 provides additional funding for One North Carolina small business. It's an additional $2 million recurring. Item 59 provides $1 million non-recurring for defense innovation grants, which will be administered through the 1NC small business program as well. Item 60 provides funds for the All-Star race that I mentioned earlier at North Wilkesboro Speedway. This is the race that the department is doing the economic impact study for. And item 61 is budgeting the transfer of funds from the World University Games Reserve for the World University Games, which North Carolina is hosting in 2029. The next page, D39, is the Commerce Special Fund. Items 62, 63, and 64 are just budgeting the transfer of funds from items that you've already seen in 14602. Items 65, 66, and 67 are transfers from the cash balances of those programs, that's the JMAC, 1NC, and rural infrastructure programs, to the Shell Buildings Pilot Program, which is to be administered by Golden Leaf. And that is the end of the commerce items. So we can now switch to the commerce special provisions. In the budget bill or budget packet, whichever you're looking at, it begins towards the bottom of page 240. The first item is the Community Development Block Grant provision. This is a boilerplate provision allocating the federal Community Development Block Grant funds. The next item begins on page 243. This is also a boilerplate item. These are the nonprofit reporting requirements for the nonprofits that receive funds in the budget. If you look on page 244, lines 8 through 11, you'll see the nonprofits listed. The only change this year is the addition of the National Institute of Minority Economic Development. The next item is the NC Biotechnology provision, section 11.3. This is a boilerplate provision allocating or laying out what the biotech center can do with the recurring funding. The next one, starting on line 42, is a change to the profit sharing agreement with the North Carolina Biotechnology Center. Currently, the center shares with the state profits made from state funds in excess of $150,000. This provision tells the Biotechnology Center to renegotiate that memorandum of understanding so that the new limit is $1 million. So only profits in excess of $1 million will be shared with the state. Kind of on the bottom of that page, but mostly on the next page, 245. The next item is a modification to the statute for Golden Leaf. It removes the requirement that Golden Leaf consult with a GovOps commission before adopting bylaws or adopting their annual operating budget. Line 33 on the same page is the vocational training workforce grants provision. This is the related provision for the money going to Golden Leaf for the workforce grants program. The grants can be used for community colleges or other institutions, for equipment and instructional materials, or to students attending those programs. Line 44 on that page is the provision for the Golden Leaf Shell Building Pilot Program. This is a pilot program, so the funds are to go in equal grants to Bladen, Cabarrus, and Franklin counties. Funds can be used for the construction or planning of shell buildings and do require a local match. On page 246, line 24, is the provision for the economic impact study of the NASCAR All-Star Race. Line 35 is the NC Innovation provision. So NC Innovation is a nonprofit. They are receiving $50 million non-recurring in the second year of the biennium. This provision lays out that they must come up with a plan for those funds. The plan must be approved by the governor and submitted to the General Assembly. It must meet the goals laid out in this section, which begins on line 48 on page 246 and continues on to line 8 on page 247. And as well, in the remainder of that, subsections 1 through 21 are items that must be addressed in the plan. On page 248, line 18, this is a extension to funds that EDP&C received last biennium from December 31st, 2024 to June 30th, 2025. Line 34 is modifications to the Megasites program. As I mentioned, the Megasites Readiness Program was set up in Session Law 2022-74. There's some modifications to it for this next phase of the program. It adds infrastructure planning to the allowable uses as well as due diligence. The very bottom of page 249, basically page 250, is the Select Sites program. So the Select Sites program is modeled on the Megasites program, except that, again, Select Sites are smaller than Megasites. So those are the parcels of land that are less than 1,000 acres. And that is it for the special provisions in commerce.
Questions? Representative Jeffries.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My question is around the Golden Leaf Shell Building Pilot Program. The number 2 provision there to grant required match of $1 for every 3 state dollars. Was there any consideration given to the rural counties, given that they're going to have to do the same match as an urban county that probably could afford to do a shell building by themselves? And
Jenny?
Thank you, sir. At this stage, that match is only going to apply, as this is the pilot program, to Bladen, Cabarrus, and Franklin counties.
okay, so this will not be open for everyone to apply for.
This is a pilot.
This is a pilot. Thank you, sir.
Is that good? Any other questions? Representative Hager.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just had a quick question about the North Carolina Innovation. So is that a nonprofit that's not yet set up yet, or is that something that's already there? And if so, who sets it up, I guess?
Jenny?
Thank you, sir. NC Innovation is an already existing nonprofit. It's an independent nonprofit.
Okay, thank you.
Representative Quick.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My question is on Megasite readiness programs. We're going up from 5 to 7 megasites. Is there, what's the thinking behind that? Have we identified areas where there potentially could be these megasites?
Jenny?
Thank you. So the first phase of the Megasites Readiness Program was to commission an independent study of potential megasites in the state, and I believe based on that study, that is why this is going from 5 to 7. The results of the study are due later this year.
Is it in any way connected to the fact that at least the Guilford-Randolph megasite has been pulled off of and is now being used? Are we trying to replace that?
We would assume that that might have something to do with it. It might not. As you're stated, it is in process now, so won't be any more studying of that one. Other questions? Representative Brody.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Going back to that shell building program, just maybe two, one for clarification, then one to ask about. I know that Bladen County is a Tier 1 county. I know Cabarrus is a Tier 3. Would it be fair to assume that Franklin is a Tier 2?
Jenny.
I don't know, sir, but I can find out for you.
Okay, well, may I make a comment, please, on this? Now, I often drive up I-85 through Cabarrus County, and I would say you can't go more than a quarter mile without seeing a new shell building. So they really don't have an issue with it. These are being put up by private, and as fast as you can put them up. It would seem to me a pilot might be more effective targeting it to maybe Tier 1, maybe Tier 2, but I mean Tier 1 counties. That's just my comment, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Representative Brody. This is a full chair item that was brought to us.
Thank you very much for that information.
Representative Jeffers.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mega Site Readiness Program, what is the maximum you could, I see here for if funds are used for acquisition, the local government will be responsible for the remainder of the cost of the purchase, but what is the maximum that they could apply for in that grant?
Jenny?
I apologize, I don't have that with me. I will look it up and get back to you.
Thank you.
Other questions? Seeing none, we shall proceed. Thank you.
Oh, I've got one more section.
Okay, I'm
Did you
sorry.
want me to do labor? Yes.
Yeah, go ahead, Jenny.
Thank you, sir. All right, apologies, I'll put with me a little bit longer. We will be doing the labor money items next, starting on page D73. We'll be starting at the bottom of that, page 131, as Christine already previewed for you, or, stole my thunder. The budget provides about $490,000 to the department to shift positions within the administration division that are currently supported by receipts from the Elevator and Amusement Device Bureau and Boiler Safety Bureau. So that is that 6 FTE shift that Christine highlighted in the fund code table. The next page, D74, item 134, provides $750,000 non-recurring for the Be Pro, Be Proud trailer. And that is it for the Department of Labor.
Questions on Department of Labor? All right, seeing none, we shall proceed. Christine? Thank you, Jenny.
All right, we'll shift our attention now to the Department of Environmental Quality. So if everyone can go to page D48. The first item in environmental quality is a base budget correction. It's just taking some general fund money out of a fund code that should be wholly federally supported. Item 73 is providing $55,000 for the drone program. That'll be drones that are used throughout the department for various purposes. Item 74 on the next page is providing $173,000 in both years for geographic information system licenses, again, throughout the department. Item 75 is adding an additional economic development project liaison. The 21 or 22 budget also had one of these, and so this is adding another to help with those economic development projects and permitting of those. Item 76 is providing $1 million recurring and $2.5 million non-recurring for the data modernization project at DEQ. And you'll also see when we get to the special funds, $3.5 million non-recurring is being appropriated to continue the permit transformation project. So both of those things are tied in with the $1 million recurring appropriation here that is providing a position to help manage those projects. Item number 77 is providing an additional environmental assistance coordinator in the Wilmington Regional Office to help with the permitting situation down there. Item 78 is providing $1 million recurring and $500,000 non-recurring for DEEC's Recycled Materials Management, Environmental Stewardship Initiative, and Waste Reduction Partners programs. The $500,000 non-recurring is transferring into their special fund and will be used for grants, grant programs that already exist in DEECs for local governments and for businesses. If you turn to page D50, I'm gonna jump you around a little bit. So items 80, 81, 82, and 84 on page D51 are providing $4 million and 24 FTE to address emerging compounds. So there's positions provided in the Division of Water Resources, the Division of Waste Management, and the Division of Air Quality for that. And there's also $300,000 recurring transferring to the Bernard Allen Drinking Water Fund, and we'll see that again in the special fund section. Item 83 on page D51 is a base budget correction. In the 21 budget, the General Assembly provided 4 additional positions for the landslide mapping program. DEQ transferred those positions to the special fund. They shouldn't have been transferred, so this is moving the positions back to the general fund where they need to be in order to get legislative salary increases and other fun stuff and revert when the money is not spent. Yeah, good, thanks. And you'll see the money actually for that in the special fund page in a minute. So if you turn to page D52, Item 86 is correcting the base budget in the Division of Marine Fisheries. You may recall they got like $7.7 million from NOAA for commercial fishing grants after COVID. And that was a non-recurring one-time money, but for some reason it had been put into their base budget on a recurring basis, so this is just backing that out. Item 87 is providing $95,000 for the Coastal Reserve Site Maintenance Program. The next three items are receiving funds from the State Emergency Response and Disaster Relief Fund, SERDIF. The first, and these are all going to Coastal Federation. The first is $500,000 for debris removal. The second, Living Shorelines, $2 million for the Living Shoreline Program. And then on page D53, $5 million for the Stormwater Retrofit Pilot Cost Share Program. On page D54, moving into the special funds, for the first special fund is the Environmental Quality Special Fund, and this one houses several different programs. So the first of those programs is the Shallow Draft Navigation Channel Dredging and Aquatic Weed Program. Items 91 and 92 are earmarking some funds from that pot of money for two specific projects, one at Lake Gaston for the Lingbaya, and one at Lake Tabor for aquatic weed. Item 93 is correcting the base budget and air quality. Item 94 is the first of three IIJA appropriations, and then 95 is the match for that. So 94 is grid resiliency grants for the State Energy Office that are coming from the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act from last year. And that program is going to continue for 5 years, so you'll see this a couple more times. And then 95 is appropriating from the federal match reserve to the State Energy Office to match that grant. On page D56, this is just some correction. The first item on item 96 is correcting the base budget for air quality. Somehow their base certified budget had gotten way above what they actually had available to spend, even in their cash balance. And so item 1 is correcting that, and then item 97 is increasing the amount that they are authorized to spend and that they will receive from fuel tax based on the actual revenue forecast. On page D57, in the Disaster Special Fund, item 98 is providing $10 million from the SERDIF for the Resilient Coastal Communities Program. Item 99 is the base budget correction I was talking to you about earlier with the landslide mapping positions that were moved to the general fund. This is moved to the special fund. This is moving them back to the general fund. Item 100 is providing 6 time-limited positions for the flood resiliency blueprint at almost $1 million non-recurring in both years. And then item 101 is providing an additional $5 million for the Stony Creek pilot project. On page D58, and this is the Water Resources Development grants. Usually, so these are actually appropriated from the SCIF, their capital, and in previous years you didn't see these in this section of the budget, you only saw them in the capital section. Last year there was a change to create this special fund in the Agner section in DEQ so you can actually see the money being appropriated and how much is available for each project. So I'm not going to go through all of those, but I will draw your attention to item 106. For the EQIP, it's $2 million non-recurring in both years, and that'll provide grants to match federal funds for local governments. And then also item 109 is providing $3 million non-recurring each year, again, for state and local projects. Those will go out as grants. Turning to page D60, item 110 is a correction to the base budget for Marine Patrol. Page D61 is receding the $300,000 for the Bernard Allen Drinking Water Fund that's related to emerging compounds. On page D62, item 113 is just a base budget correction to the Marine Resources Fund. On page D63 this is fun. This is $1 billion in both years for water and wastewater grants. Well, $900 million in both years, because the 100 million.
Don't hear that beat.
Billion.
Don't hear that beat.
300 million in each year for the viable utility reserve. That's the program that funds distressed units infrastructure. They can use that for planning and infrastructure. Item 115 is 600 million in both years for water and wastewater reserve grants. Again, and this is just for infrastructure. Item 116 is $100 million non-recurring in both years for planning and infrastructure for stormwater. Page D64 is receiving the grant money for the DEECS grant programs. Page D65, in case the $2 billion on the page before wasn't enough for water and wastewater, here's some more water and wastewater money. Item 118 is receiving funds from IIJA for the Clean Water State Revolving Fund. This is wastewater. Item 119 is providing the match for that money from the federal match reserve. And then item 120 is receiving additional federal money that is being provided for wastewater wastewater projects related to emerging compounds. Turning to page D66, for the drinking water fund, item 121 is providing budgeting additional federal money for that. Item 122 is the match. Item 123 is emerging compounds related to drinking water from the federal government. And then item 124 are lead remediation grants for IIJA. Item 125, grants for small and disadvantaged communities. And then finally, item 126 is budgeting just a small increase to the regular drinking water state revolving fund allocation from the EPA, and no match is required because they have enough money in their match to match $378,000. So, all told, I believe it's around $350 million in additional money coming from the federal government for water infrastructure, in addition to the $2 billion. So, moving into the provisions. The DEQ provisions start on page 251. The first one is the shallow draft directed grants, which is earmarking those two projects from shallow draft. Section 12.2 at the bottom, or on page 252, starting on line 7, are the water and sewer infrastructure funds. Again, the split's $300 million for viable utility and $600 million for water and wastewater. And the same limitations, there is no limit on the grants in statute. There's a $3 million limit. This provision lifts that limit. Section 12.2C on line 21 is giving the department the authority to move funds in and out of projects that had been funded from State Fiscal Recovery Fund, the ARPA money, in 21. They can move those into other funds if those projects look like they're taking too long, because there is a limit. The federal government has a limit on how long people have to spend the ARPA money. It has to be actually spent by December 31st, 2026. So if projects are taking longer and they have things that can maybe be done in a shorter period of time, they can just swap the source of the money. 12.2 allows them to keep 3% for administration, 12.2D, and then on line 31, 12.2E is requiring a report. Section 12.3, starting on line 37, is just clarifying the viable utility reserve grant criteria to make it clear that the State Water Infrastructure Authority will also adopt criteria related to distressed units that have been taken over by the local government commission. 12.4A is the LASSI program, the stormwater money. This is the same as it was in 21, except that if you turn to page 253, subsection 12.4B, last year, in 21, when this LASSI program was set up, the split between planning and infrastructure grants was 80-20. It was a little too much on the planning and not enough on the infrastructure, so this changes that split. So now it's 85% of the money can be used for infrastructure and 15% for planning. Down on the bottom of page 259 in section 12.5, prohibit cap and trade requirements for CO2 emissions. This provision is prohibiting any entity of the state from requiring that utilities participate in a program that requires them to obtain allowances to offset their CO2 emissions. It also prohibits the governor and DEQ from entering into any such agreement with other states that would require North Carolina to participate in a cap and trade program. On the next page, 254, line 9 is section 12.6, prohibition on state and regional emission standards for new motor vehicles. This is prohibiting the state from adopting standards related to emission control from new motor vehicles, including requirements that mandate the sale or purchase of zero-emission vehicles. On line 24, subsection 12.7 is reducing the number of counties subject to emissions inspections. Currently, 19 counties have emissions inspections. This will drop it down so only Mecklenburg will have the emission inspection requirement. I do want to note safety inspections will still be required throughout. So the section's effective on the later of July 1st, 2024, or 60 days after the EPA certifies the new state implementation plan. Mr. Chair, that is all I have for DEQ, if anyone has any questions.
Any questions for Ms. Leggett, Representative Brody, and then Representative Ager?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Is there a line item for that would account for lapse salaries out of DEQ?
Ms. Leggett?
So lapse salaries are generated when positions are vacant. They're actually the salaries and benefits that have been appropriated to pay the person who was in that position. So there's not one line item that is lapse salary. The salary and benefits lines are lapse salary if the positions are vacant. And then they can move, the State Budget Act has strict limitations on how they can use those funds, so the departments can move lapse salary around for non-recurring expenses. So if they need to buy a piece of equipment or something, they can use lapse salary for that. Otherwise, if it's not used, it reverts at the end of the year and becomes part of your next year's availability.
Other questions? Thank you. Proceed.
Okay, I'm going to move on then to the Department of Natural and Cultural Resources. First, I'm going to put my glasses on so I can actually see it, and then, let's see, the answer starts on page D83. Item number 139 down there at the bottom of the page is providing one position for their Human Resources Office to coordinate the criminal background check program for the entire department. Right now, they sort of have piecemeal criminal background checks, but because they do have so many children going through their facilities, this will allow them to create a department-wide uniform process for that. Down on page D84, down on the bottom there, you'll see on item 142, one position for the Historic Preservation Office, an environmental review specialist there, to work primarily on disaster needs, but also to provide technical assistance for disaster planning, recovery, response, and mitigation that is related to historic preservation. Item 143 is providing two positions and $300,000 for the underwater archaeology lab. On page D85, item 144 is providing 7 new positions to bring the minimum level of staffing at each historic site up to 4 FTE. And you can see, I've listed out in the snappy there, the state historic sites that currently are not at 4 FTE, and so they will be getting an additional position. Item 145 is providing one position and some funding for to promote activities and initiatives, provide information, and do public engagement with the state's 26 historic sites. Right now, they do that sort of piecemeal at each site. Some do a better job of it than others, and so this will provide them with some uniformity to that process. Item 146 is providing 5 FTE. The funding and operating costs plus $300,000 non-recurring for the Thomas Day State Historic Site. That's the newest state historic site in Milton. Item 147 is transferring the Tobacco Farm Life Museum, which is currently a nonprofit museum in Johnston County, to the North Carolina Museum of History as a satellite facility. Provides $350,000 recurring for that, along with 4 positions, and $25,000 non-recurring. There's a special provision that goes along with this as well. Down on the bottom in the arts section, item 148 is providing $242,000 additional funding to the Museum of Art for operating funds, and that's primarily related to increased operating needs associated with the new Park Welcome Center there. Item 149 is providing an additional $140,000 recurring for operating needs at what was formerly known as SECA. You'll see there's a special provision in here that will change the name of the Southeastern Center for Contemporary Art from SECA to the North Carolina Museum of Art at Winston-Salem. Item 150 is providing $750,000 non-recurring in both years to match a grant for the A+ Schools program. On page D86, item 151 is providing $3.5 million recurring in additional funding for the grassroots arts grants. This particular pot of money will be specifically for Tier 1 and Tier 2 county grants. Item 152 is providing additional money for the symphony for their educational programming. It's $394,000 recurring and $4 million non-recurring. In the library, item 153 is providing 1 position to work on digital literacy programs in rural parts of the state. Item 154 is providing $400,000 recurring for the postage needs related to the Cardinal Consortium. And if you recall from presentations, Cardinal is the library sharing program, where if you live in Transylvania County and you want a book that is in Dare County, they will mail you that book, so you can borrow it that way. Well, postage obviously is kind of expensive for that program, so this is providing operating funds for that. Item 155 is increasing the recurring appropriation for the library grants programs to $20 million, which is really nice because it's hard to remember 14182343. So, very happy about that. Turning to page D87, item 156 is providing 5 additional positions for the Dueling Dinosaurs exhibit, which I believe is going to be opening in the fall of this year. And item 157 is providing 2 additional positions for the North Carolina Museum of Natural Science at Whiteville. Item 158 is providing 2 additional positions to the state parks for the prescribed fire crew. Item 159 is providing $3.8 million recurring and $3.7 million non-recurring, 27 positions in the first year and 37 in the second for parks operating reserves. These are increased operating needs related to expansion or improvements at various state parks, and listed there are the ones that are going to be getting funds from this. Item 160 is increasing the recurring amount for PARTIF to $30 million recurring each year, and they're doing the same thing with Land and Water Fund, and also providing $20 million non-recurring for grants there. 65% of the PARTIF money goes to the state parks, and then the rest of it is for grants to local governments or nonprofits. On 161, the Saluda Grade Trail is providing $17 million from the State Fiscal Recovery Reserve. The State Fiscal Recovery Reserve is the reserve that is holding the interest the state has earned on the money from the State Fiscal Recovery Fund from ARPA. And so that money is free and clear, does not have any restrictions on when it needs to be expended or anything like that. It's just interest that we've earned. So this is providing $17 million to purchase this North Carolina